Nerd Morning, everyone. My name is Jeremy, and today on the Nerd Morning Show, I'm going to be talking about New Spring, which is the prequel to the Wheel of Time series. This is an absolutely fascinating book and an amazing, amazing series. I absolutely love the Wheel of Time, and I have read the book series like 3 or 4 times, and there are, including the prequel, 15 books, and New Spring is the smallest book in the entire series. It is one of those massive epics, and it takes weaving and turns with various characters and explores this whole huge world, multiple cultures. It's a massive, massive undertaking, and for me, that's some of the fantasy stories that I absolutely love. Now, in the prequel, New Spring, we get to explore some of the characters who were like the mentors in the Wheel of Time, but we get to see them here when they're younger and they're starting to figure out kind of what their destiny is going to be, but they haven't yet reached there as they would have already in the Wheel of Time series. Now, some of the key characters in New Spring is Lady Moiranine, who is a young, noble woman who is a part of now being trained to be an Aes Sedai, which are the magic wielders in the series. And all of the magic wielders in the book series are women because there are two forms of the magic, the male side and the female side, and the male side is tainted by the Dark One, and that's like their devil. And so the men who are able to channel or use the magic are often go insane or create terrible wars or things like that. So they kind of have to stop or control those individuals really, really quickly. But the women, they aren't tainted by the magic, and so they're able to use it and be kind of these wise women, these powerful individuals, and Moraine is training to become an Aes Sedai. And she has a really close friend, Siuan, who was a fisherman's daughter and joined in the ranks as well to be trained as an Aes Sedai member. And we start out in the first section of the story with those two characters as they are in the position called the Accepted, and as they're training to become full-fledged Aes Sedai, which again are the magic wielders of the story. And as they're learning and progressing and training in the White Tower, they hear a prophecy of the Dragon Reborn, and he's being born. And this is something that's been anticipated in their world for a very long time. The Dragon Reborn is the individual who has the ability to fight the Dark One and is essentially like the savior of their world. But there are a lot of different interpretations on whether or not he's going to be really that good or really destructive or somewhere in between, because he's going to be an individual who wields the male half of the power, which is tainted, meaning that he will likely be going insane while he's pursuing saving the world. And so there is this urgency to find him, to be able to train him, to be able to guide him in order to be able to ensure that he will be able to successfully accomplish all the things in the prophecies in order to be able to save the world from the darkness. And this is this big thing, and they hear this prophecy, and they're one of the very few who hear exactly what the prophecy said, and so they have this advantage over some of the other individuals who are trying to piece it together. And that's where the first big part of the story really takes place, is as Moraine and Siuan are training, as well as the White Tower, the organization of the Aes Sedai, are going out and trying to find out who was born and if that person matches the descriptions that was given inside of the prophecy, and if so, then they found the Dragon Reborn and they're able to guide and raise him. The second part of the story is after they become Aes Sedai, and Moraine finally is able to go out on her adventure and truly look for the Dragon Reborn. She feels like it's her responsibility and her duty to find him, because she's also finding that there are other influential individuals who are trying to look and find the Dragon Reborn as well, and they might have darker motives. In fact, they might even be serving the Dark One, whom the Dragon Reborn is supposed to fight against. So she's out here looking and trying to discover where where the Dragon Reborn is, and on her quests and looking for things, she meets up with Lan Mandragoren, who is a person who was like of the noble line of the Kingdom of Malchiere. And Malchiere is one of the countries that was in the Borderlands. And the Borderlands is this like border between the dark part of the world that has been blighted by the darkness of the like the devil character in the book series, and there are these monsters and creatures that come from that land and attack the countries below, and the borderland countries are these warrior people who fight against this blight. And his kingdom was destroyed, and he could become king of this kingdom, but it was destroyed, and so he's this like king that could be. And there are individuals who want him to assume that title and claim a kingdom that's been broken, and he feels like he needs to fight against the darkness and avenge his kingdom in some ways, but he also doesn't want people to necessarily be following him because he feels like it's a battle that he himself cannot win, and they couldn't win even if they followed him, and so he doesn't want to bring all these other people to his death. But he wants to fight against this, and when he connects with Moraine, he ultimately learns of a new way that he could fight against the darkness, and that's helping her. And that's how we're able to get them all set up into a position to where they are the mentors for the new characters who are introduced in the Wheel of Time, including the Dragonborn himself. So the story has some really, really strong points. It's awesome to be able to explore these characters on their younger stages and to see these like mentors when they're just figuring things out. That's super fun, particularly for people who are really, really into the Wheel of Time and love that series. But this book has a couple of weaknesses, and I think that they're pretty fair. One of the things that it suffers from is a weakness that's pretty common for all prologues, and that is we already know where the characters are going to end up because we have, before this book being published, that story of the Wheel of Time, and so because of that, we know kind of where they're going to get to at the end of the story, and so there's a little less mystery, and I feel like this one suffers a little bit from that. Also, compared to how much they jam-pack in the other Wheel of Time books, I feel like this one has a little bit less that happens in it. And granted, this book is like half the size as the other books, so that is somewhat understandable. And I think maybe it's also because the stakes of this book are a lot smaller than they are in the other books, and I think that's because the things that we're trying to get to are not necessarily as death-defying or earth-shattering as they will progress to be. And I feel like because the stakes are a little bit lower, it has a little bit less tension, and I feel like that makes the pace of the story a little bit slower. I think this is probably the weakest out of all the 15 books in the Wheel of Time series, but that being said, it's still one of my favorite series, and this is a book that I have returned to and read multiple times because I love it so much. I think that people who are really interested in stories that have multiple points of view and are interested in trying to dive into a grand, epic world, this book and this book series is one that I definitely recommend. For people who are looking for smaller stories that are a little more simple, this one might be a little bit more challenging to digest just because it has such an immense scope. But I think if people are willing to give it a try, I think there's a lot of amazing things that it offers. This book was written in a way that if you hadn't read the Wheel of Time series yet, you could read it and it would be a self-contained experience that you would be explained how the magic works and all those types of things, and so you would be able to get the whole story. Honestly, I think that the best way to read this is after you see through the Wheel of Time series, there's going to be a point where there's a shift in Moraine's character and how much we actually get to see and interact with her, and I think that's honestly a great point to pause reading the Wheel of Time and read this book and then return to the Wheel of Time. I think that that's just like the best placement for this book, but ultimately you can read this in any order because it is a self-contained story inside of the Wheel of Time. Well, this is my review of the book New Spring from the Wheel of Time series. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed this, like this video, and be sure to subscribe. Also, if you're interested in supporting me in other ways, I have a Patreon with different rewards and opportunities for things there. That's something I just invite you to check out as well. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll catch you guys next time.